I'm Emily Sheffield, editor of the Evening Standard, and I'm delighted to introduce my great friend, the designer Anya Hindmarch. Anya is one of my favourite people on the planet. There is no one I know with more imagination, drive, human kindness and entrepreneurial zeal. We got to know each other very well during my years as deputy editor of British Vogue. Few women have made such an indelible mark on the British fashion landscape as Anya has. She sold her first leather bags at the age of 18, and by her mid-20s had a fully fledged label and Princess Diana among her many customers. For decades, her brand has drawn customers for its stylish, fun and irreverently British aesthetic. Clutches resembling sparkling Walker's crisp packets, but it's also one with a mission at its core. In 2007, many years before sustainability became an essential buzzword for every fashion house, Anya launched her I Am Not a Plastic Bag tote, prompting stampedes at stores around the world. She has banged the drum for planet-friendly fashion ever since, most recently launching her I Am a Plastic Bag range made entirely of recycled bottles. This month, she's also doing her bit to revive London's high streets after a devastating year, opening her very own 5-store village in Pont Street. Anya, welcome and thank you very much for joining me.
Lovely introduction.
At the end of a very busy week, as you know, this was the week you launched your 5 stores.
Yeah, it had 5 stores, a cafe and a hair salon actually, which, none of which
Have
is
you had
particularly
time to go to the hair salon?
Let me tell you, so clearly not.
No, you do look like you've been to the hair salon.
It's been quite a windy day.
So how's it gone?
You know, it's been the most fun, actually. I mean, it's lovely to be doing things. It's a really nice moment. We wanted to open on May 17th, which felt like such an important day. And I think we've had 473 hair salon appointments.
Wow.
It's just gone mad. And opening a cafe has been really fun. I mean, there's lots of learnings.
But were you not quite nervous to... You know, it has been a terrible year for retail. Did a bit of a sort of clutch in the stomach at opening 5 stores?
Well, we've been planning it for a while.
Right.
So in a way, I took that decision a while back, actually pre-COVID, actually. And in fact, I think almost never more important, actually, than to do things. And I think that retail is changing so much anyway. It feels nice to do very experiential retail and make it fun for people. And actually, just getting people together has been really special this week. Yeah. So it's been much needed. Yeah.
And you said never waste a good crisis. But it's been a devastating year for the fashion and retail industry. What opportunities are there now for change, do you think?
Well, and to be clear, I mean, there's nothing good about this crisis.
No.
This has been very hard for so many. I think, however, it's important to try and find silver linings where you can and to have that moment just to stop and to take stock. And I think for me that was really important. I think that, interestingly, we were all on this conveyor belt of madness, slightly out of control in many ways, I think, in terms of everything that's happening. And I think for me, the most important thing is to actually think, as we come out of this crisis, how do we change? You know, for me, it's all about the planet. We've got 10 years to sort this problem out. So actually, what do we do differently? And in fashion, where it's a brilliant and important industry. It employs so many people, but we have to think about waste, we have to think about pollution, we have to think about the fashion seasons and cycles. So we've really been thinking about actually changing. In fact, we changed our fashion dates and seasons during this lockdown period, and actually took it back to the sort of the dates of old, if you like, and I've really thought about the materials we use and a number of things that we've sort of set in stone now that I think we won't go back to. You know, being, for example, travel or NSC being on planes, big teams of people, that just no longer seems so modern, actually. So I think we really have changed.
Do you think there's a danger that we will slip back into old habits, though? I mean, I'd like to think that we fought hard at the Standard. The crisis has been terrible, particularly for London, actually. But you want some good to come out of it. But, you know, our streets are packed with cars. There's going to be economic strains on a lot of businesses where I worry sustainability is going to be an extra cost they're not going to be able to manage.
Well, I do think that it's important to have successful businesses in a way so that you can afford to keep the environment at the top of your agenda. And of course, if people are hungry, then that slips down.
Yeah.
But so therefore, I think it's important that, you know, we do support businesses and get out and do our bit. But I do think, though, there are ways that don't damage the economy that actually benefit the planet. And I think it's finding those.
Yeah.
And I think, of course, we will go back in many ways to lots of things we used to do, and that's brilliant and right. But I'm sure that we will all think a little bit differently. We were chatting just 5 minutes ago about how we just make some adjustments that make a bit more sense, probably.
Do you think there's any way the government can help at this moment in time? Because particularly the fashion industry is straining under many things, post-Brexit, terrible year for retail if you own a store, sales anyway down because we're all at home. Is there anything you're discussing at the BFC with the government? There might be certain tax breaks or grants for fashion companies to go more sustainable? Because there are added costs.
Yes.
And it's why a lot of bigger companies can do it and smaller ones can't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing, kind of more than government and sort of nanny state, and by the way, the government did a huge amount for business with furlough. It was one of those moments, I remember when that furlough scheme came out, and so many people were writing letters of, having to make redundancies. So it really did save a lot of jobs. But I'm a great believer in actually government not getting too involved and actually letting the companies and the customers dictate. I mean, I had a lovely moment actually at a leather fair a few, 2 years ago probably now, when there was this stand that had this environmentally good leather versus all the other stands that didn't. And this stand was rammed because actually that's what we want to buy. It's what our customers are demanding. And suddenly you see all the other stands going, hang on a second, what's going on there? So change happens very quickly if customers demand it, and they will follow profit. That's human nature. It's the carrot.
And also a lot of the damage is in the production for the planet. But we have got very big, giant retail companies now changing that.
And so actually it's the giant ones that can change it. I mean, so that's what's
because
exciting.
Because they have the influence.
Actually. Absolutely, because they have the buying power. So if one of the big
I mean, Zara,
brands,
they have done a lot, actually.
And many of them actually have done a huge amount, and they really can affect change, which smaller brands really benefit from because, they've done the R&D, they can put the investment in, and in fact, the supply chain will put the investment in because they know they'll get the orders. So, you know what, I'm actually quite hopeful. I think that everyone wants to do things in a better way, and I mean, I think the younger generation are brilliant and admirable, and just not taking no for an answer, which is, and all of us, but particularly they've really sort of shouted loudly. So I think it's happening actually very fast, but we need to keep up the pressure for sure.
Definitely. Anya, you know that I've jokingly suggested, but not that jokingly, that I think you should be the next mayor of London.
Here she goes again.
Now, Boris Johnson sought your advice on making London look good for the Olympics. What advice would you give Sadiq on reviving London's high streets and sending a big positive message about London globally and to the rest of the UK?
Well, I'm such a believer in London. I think London will repair itself, actually. I mean, there's such an innate creativity in this city that is the bit that just makes me, I mean, it's why London is London. It's enormous. It's so diverse. It's so exciting. It feels like you're into millions of different villages and countries even in some ways. And I think it's the most exciting city in the world, and I've travelled a lot. So it will sort itself out because it just does tend to kind of regenerate. And I mean, I think that where retail has obviously been very hit, the high streets have been very hit, that of course is to do with the pandemic, but it's also, it's a bit like when horses and carts suddenly felt the hit when cars came out. I mean, there are step changes in development, sword makers to guns, it just does happen. And I think there was a huge element of that as well. So we will have a lot of probably empty stores. That's a reality. The internet was the effect that made the change. But actually, we will infill those with younger brands. I mean, who knows, it might be theatre. There will be people who want space, even apartments, which we were desperately short of, and housing. So it will fill in. Who doesn't want to fill empty space with something creative and fun? It will totally happen. And it'll probably be a healthy version of that. So, so I'm pretty hopeful.
How did the pandemic forward wind your digital side of the business?
Well, it was already pretty significant for us, honestly, but it gave me time to put both feet into it because normally I'm going to Japan or Hong Kong or New York or Fashion Week, or I'm on the road, or I'm just busy with all the stores, and it gave me a moment to really sit and be in every meeting and to really learn, actually, because I'm 53, so actually it's not my first language, if you like. So it was really useful, actually, and it's incredibly exciting. I mean, anyone can start a business, with probably with £100, frankly, and either via social media or through
Instagram,
a website. When I started a business, I had to sign a shop with a 10-year lease. That was quite scary. So it's a really exciting moment, and anyone can make anything and sell it, and that's pretty cool.
Just on a personal note, I do know you as someone who is incredibly busy all the time, zooming around. You did have stores all over, still have stores around the world. How did you find stopping? Like, you weren't allowed to move. How did you find that?
Aside from the scary side, and it took obviously everyone a moment to readjust to a kind of hibernating sort of state, and the rebudgeting and making sure I could look after everyone. That was and I had COVID at that period as well, so it wasn't much fun, that bit. But actually, there's lots of good moments for me in just regrouping as a family, and I have 5 kids, and so we had
Were they all with you?
We had 3 out of 5 home, and And that was pretty special. I don't think I'll ever get that time again. And actually spending time really thinking about the business and not just rushing. So it was, stopping's pretty good. We also did quite a lot of projects. We obviously planned this village that we've just opened, and we did some projects actually for the NHS for, we managed to help make some gowns and get some gowns funded for various hospitals around London, which was nice to use our supply chain in that way. And these quite cool things called the holsters, which helps people in intensive care. So we actually were pretty busy, but it gave us time to actually just refocus a little bit, which is good. Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of us were very, very busy, but I think it was also a different thing for most of us to be anchored in one place. You know, a lot of people do rush from, you know, the commuting, the rushing back and forth. And I think we have seen a bit of a sea change where a lot of people are saying now, well, I don't want to commute into the office every single day. How are you, what plans do you think you have for your staff? Are you going to move to hybrid working, or what are you thinking about?
So many learnings. For me, one of the other learnings, apart from
and will you travel on a plane as much as you were?
Well, so on that, less, I think, because I mean, there is nothing that replaces seeing people. It takes the temperature of a relationship up. So if I talk to my teams, as I do in Hong Kong and Japan every week, you know, after a while you get a little bit sort of screened out, and it's quite nice just to see people and regroup. And I've noticed in the office when we do get together, it's the meetings are sort of just somehow it just changes the dynamic. So I think it's important, but less. And I'm someone who's been lucky and travelled a huge amount for work and because I love travelling, and I just feel I have to sort of hand that baton on, because I think travel is important, but actually it's not appropriate, I think, to jump on a plane for 4 days to Tokyo, which I would have done regularly. And so I think that's something to think about. I think that if I looked at my days of old, when I was yo-yoing backwards and forwards to meetings and you know, that you now can do on a screen, and that takes that gives you a lot of time back. So I think I'll definitely keep that. And in terms of the office, and we had been looking to work towards anyway more flexible working. Frightening when you're the boss, because you don't quite know how to sort of manage it all. But clearly it's the right thing to do. We've all proven that it's possible, and I suspect we'll end up probably doing a sort of Tuesday to Thursday. So Tuesday's the new Monday. But with everyone being a bit flexible as is needed, really.
Do you think one of the advantages I've saying, I suppose because I've got children at school still, and one of the things I battled with when my children were young, I was working 5 days a week, I really didn't see them, is that with a bit more, but I had a big job and it wasn't 2 days, you know. But if I'd been working from home maybe 2 days a week, I could have picked them up from school. I would have still got... Do you think for women and, well, for fathers too, I've seen in my workplace that actually they're picking their children... Well, when they're not locked down, they have been picking their children up from school, and there is a bit maybe more of a work-life balance. And
for sure. I mean, I think also, you know, the fact is I kind of log on early in the morning and I can do a couple of hours then. I tend to work quite late, but you know, people are grown-ups. They can find a way. I mean, it depends on your job, obviously. I think that, you know, we will probably end up dividing our kind of employment contracts into sort of 4. So A might be people who are kind of key workers, have to be in the office. That might be warehouse people or reception people, or and then, you know, B will be people with fixed certain days. C might be people with variable days, and D is perhaps totally remote. So, but my kids have been working like that for a while, so it's only new to me. It's, you know, the dinosaur in the office. So, so it, you know, all of that has massive benefits, and I think for kids and parents, it's huge. Yeah, huge.
Because we are in a world now where often in families 2 parents are working, and then schools end at 4. That is a 3:30. That is a problem for most working people.
And I had a lovely moment when I was sitting at my kitchen table, and it was my market week where we were selling to all the stores across the world, and so I'd start in sort of Asia and end my day in the States. And there was a point when 1 or 2 children were sort of sitting having their lunch while I was doing these calls, and it's a bit like bringing your child to work day. You know, they learn, and actually you hear what's going through their minds. I mean, it's pretty special actually.
Yeah, no, it is. Sales, unsurprisingly, of handbags have dropped 19% globally in the pandemic. How do you think our relationship with accessories has changed in the last year? And actually, I suppose, how do you think our relationship with fashion has changed in the last year? And are there any big sea changes you're already noticing?
Well, what interests me in fashion is actually fashion with purpose, and it always has, actually. And in fact, it's taken me a while to realise that, actually. Fashion per se is not as interesting. I mean, I love fashion for how it makes you feel. That is a purpose, I think, and it can make women feel better, stand better, be more confident, be the best version of themselves. And fashion that does good in some way. That might be the materials it uses, or it might be a charitable donation, or it might be about highlighting a cause and using the platform as a reason for communication. So That's what interests me. So that's always been a thread. I think that that feels more relevant than ever now, actually. I did notice, interestingly, though, during the lockdown, where, frankly, you need a handbag to take your things with you when you leave the house. I mean, that's the point of a handbag. So I was sort of bracing myself somewhat. And yet,
but your sales were quite, you had travel bags selling a lot. Was that us doing fantasy?
Well, I think it probably was. So one of our best-selling pieces was a bag called the in-flight bag, which must surely have just been people dreaming about life beyond. So obviously ever hopeful.
And then you had, what was it, describe your working from home bag. I wish I'd got one of those.
Well, I mean, I think everyone was moving from room to room.
Yeah.
So you needed essentially a bit of a portable office, unless you were lucky enough to have a nice office. And so it was essentially, and also now people are sometimes perhaps travelling for one day to the office. So it was a bag that literally is that. There's an inbox and outbox, a place for your laptop, a place for your, it's like a prompt, your glasses, your stationery. So, so you have to adapt. A lot of people are changing the way they commute. So we brought out a really lovely cycling bag. So really, there's one lovely thing, the contents of the sort of top of your desk, so your pens, your pencil sharpener, your sort of lip salve, all the things that sit on the top of your desk. We designed a bag that is that, so you can now go anywhere and open up.
God,
that.
how
It has
great.
all your things. So,
great.
You have to pivot.
Great. I'm definitely going onto your website to do some shopping. Anya, in the nicest possible way, I think you're a bit mad because you do so much all the time. And you've also written a book. If in doubt, wash your hair. Can you tell me why you decided to write this book?
Actually, I've been planning to do that. The idea for that was pre-COVID, actually. And it's funny, you hit 50, I'm now 53, but you hit 50 and you suddenly realise that you work out who you are. And it's a great shame in a way that you don't achieve that prior to being old. And so I just thought, in a way, it'd be nice to write a book. And I often do talks to women about industry and fashion and so on. And it's always the questions at the end saying, what's your best bit of advice and how do you juggle this? And those things that people really want to know. And in fact, one of the best bits of advice I always give, and people say, how do you manage your life? And it's like, you know what, if in doubt, wash your hair. It's the thing that ultimately just makes you feel better about your day.
It does.
But it also speaks to that word doubt, actually. And it's interesting. I think every person, and every woman in particular perhaps, suffers doubt. It's completely normal. And actually I've learned to realise that actually doubt makes you good. It's really good. I mean, it needs to be there. It keeps you safe. You need to perhaps turn the volume down a little bit sometimes.
Keeps you humble too, maybe.
Yes. And so I wanted to write a book about doubt, really, actually, and how I've navigated being a mum, stepmom, a woman in business, an entrepreneur, a creative, and when you're working in a creative field, as you know, doubt is there every day. Your name is above the door, and you're saying this is what I like, and it's scary. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on that, very, very honestly, really honestly, and I just had a bit more time, I guess, in lockdown to get it done. So yes, if in doubt, wash your hair. It's gone mad, literally.
Oh, it's so great. I'm a huge admirer, and weirdly, there's a lot of people I know who did write books in lockdown, while also still holding their businesses together. I'm just sort of amazed by how much time people found.
Well, it's the no commuting, isn't it? You see, that's the extra hour a day.
Yeah. I guess if women were to take one thing from the book, I always see you as sort of incredibly optimistic, brave person who sort of jumps in, and however big the project, and I've seen you take on huge, astoundingly imaginative projects and pull them off. What would be your one piece of advice to a woman embarking, I suppose, on a career, juggling children?
You know what? Just do it. It literally is that, and expect it to be hard. Expect to fail. I mean, someone asked me, what's the secret of success? And I said, actually, it's just a patchwork of failure. That's what it is. I mean, every day you make mistakes, and I always think you're trying to go from A to B, and in a way, it's like sailing. And I don't sail, so it's a bad analogy, but you go left, you go right, you tack your way to a destination, and I think that's actually what success is, probably. And so I think you just have to know that, and that's why I want to write the book, to be really honest about how it feels, because actually I think everyone thinks maybe I can't, but actually yes, you can. You totally can. You just have to expect that that's how it feels. It feels pretty hard at times, but it's worth doing. It really is worth doing.
Someone gave me a piece of advice. I'd been here 3 months, and obviously I joined in a pandemic, and it's quite a big job to take on in the middle of a very big news story, and I had 2 children at home, homeschooling, etc. And I went out for lunch in that brief break when we could in the autumn, and he said to me, Emily, you must remember to take a deep breath and look at what you've achieved the last 3 months. Is that something you're good at? Are you good at stopping? And because, as you say, there is a lot of fear, you do make mistakes, but surely we should also look at what we've achieved. And I think women again, well, men too actually, I don't know whether it's a gender thing, sometimes in that rush of success, you do work incredibly hard to be successful and to keep businesses on the go.
Yeah.
Should we also remember to just sit there and go, look, this is what we've done right?
Well, I think we're very self-critical, aren't we? We're our own harshest critics, and for sure I am, absolutely. And it's quite important to sometimes be as kind to yourself as you would to your friends or your children. And I think that's something I write about in the book, because it's very easy to only see the negative and actually not just pull back and go, actually, you know what? You haven't done so badly.
Let's celebrate this.
Let's pat yourself on the back, exactly.
And also celebrate with your team, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm good at doing that.
I think that was.
We always celebrate everything.
I think that became very important during the pandemic, is that we set up a channel where we tried to just tell everyone something good they'd done that day or that week, or.
That's a really nice idea.
Rather than always thinking what we haven't achieved.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important to kind of reframe things and to sort of zoom out a bit and take a bit of perspective. And I think women particularly are probably quite bad at that. And I find I'm always rushing on to the next thing, not taking stock.
Yeah.
So it is key to do that, and certainly I think we're all probably pretty
And maybe
terrible.
the pandemic, in a way, people being at home, I do know that some people did enjoy their lives slowing down.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it wasn't. It was. I mean, I think we can all agree this pandemic hit people very, very differently. Some people it was a new learning curve. For others, it's been fairly horrendous. So
well, it makes you realise that if relationships aren't right, that's very hard. And a lot of us live in sort of central London, small,
and some businesses won't
gardens.
make it out through no fault of their own.
No. I mean, it's been really very tough for a lot of people. So we need to get London back and going, and the jobs going, and then it all starts to be a bit more fun.
I mean, you do have five children. The eldest is 32, the youngest is 18. That is some superwoman achievement,
no,
I think.
It's not. I'm so far from superwoman.
How did you
imagine.
make time? Because I know you make time for all your children. How have you managed to compartmentalise that? Because I've definitely struggled with that. And sometimes is it that 10 minutes of total focus is better than an hour where you're half on your phone, half?
I think so. I think that's the thing. There was a lovely thing I heard the other day on the radio, which was someone saying that they collected their child from school and they went to the park and they played Batman and Robin, and then they had pizza and they had a bath, and he was tucking his child up in bed and he said it's the best day of his life. And whilst that is a pretty good day, let's face it, actually it doesn't have to be the big trip, or it's about just being really present, I think, and being there. And so I think often we think that kids need more than we think. They just actually every so often just need a little top up, and actually that can sustain them. And the great thing about kids, they're incredibly straightforward. If they need you, they become so painful that it's pretty apparent. And so I think you have to kind of trust the system a bit, actually.
Yeah.
But it's a
and
juggle.
remove the guilt.
As best you can. It's hard. I'm a Catholic, but you have to, you have to be honest with them as well, I think, and communicate. And sometimes there are times when, I'm struggling because work is, super busy week, and you have to say, listen, it's going to be tough, but we'll get to the weekend. Or likewise, when it's the week of all the school plays and all the carol concerts, to say to work, it's going to be tough, and I'll catch up. So I think communication is really important as well.
Yeah. Post-Brexit, there are some challenges for the fashion industry, and obviously you are extremely involved in the BFC. Do you think those problems are naturally fading away, or what are the things you might have struggled with? Is there something the industry could be doing or the government could be doing?
Listen, I think a lot of the problems of Brexit were, inevitably it was a sort of deal done on the courtroom steps. So there was, for us dealing with warehousing and, DHL, and suddenly no one knew, no one could prepare. So there was a period, and to a certain extent still is a bit of a period of adjustment, where it was more expensive for us, and we were all sort of reeling a little bit. And that's already, it quite quickly halved the cost, and then it's going down to pretty much not far off from where we were. So it was hard, for sure. But I think those things, it's amazing. It's sort of, everyone finds the cheaper way and the better way pretty quickly, because you have to. I think there's some issues around talent, getting talent in, and in certain sectors, travelling talent, and there's very specific things. But again, I know, talking in my industry, that it was a deal that was done. It was probably a bit broad brush because it was done, quite quickly at the end. And so then people are now reopening those discussions, going, actually, can we just adjust this and make sense of it?
And you're quite hopeful those will be overcome.
Yes, I am. And I think because it makes sense for everyone pretty much. You don't.
It's a huge industry, and I think many of us who work in fashion do sometimes feel a bit frustrated that
Mm.
don't take on what a vast industry fashion is in this country.
Well, it's a really, really important industry, and I mean, I haven't got the numbers to mind, but it's significant, and significant as an employer, and actually of women, and a very diverse employer at that as well. So it's really important.
But also us on the
yeah.
world stage. You know, we are a big fashion capital. So
absolutely, no, for sure, and it's very important.
You're an incredible entrepreneur. Your dad was an entrepreneur. I've always thought that London, many of our cities actually, have these incredible young people coming up with these amazing ideas, but it's tough being an entrepreneur. I've tried it myself. What would be your advice? You know, you set up your first business when you were 18. What would be some salient advice for someone now?
Just do it. I mean, it's not rocket science. You have to buy something and sell it for more than you bought it for. I mean, that's sort of it. And building your costs, and obviously there's all the logistics around that. But ultimately, it is as simple as that. Whether you make it or just buy something in, or whether you just do it better than someone else is doing it.
Yeah.
There's lots of routes. And I think what's great about, well, for me, when I was starting my business, is there were so many entrepreneurs around me. It was a time of there was a momentum in a way for businesses starting, and it made me think I could do that too.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many great businesses starting now, actually. I mean, I think often out of sort of weird times of adversity, people just kind of go, why not? If you've lost your job, then what have you got to lose? You might as well give it a go. So I think that it's a great city for that. And actually, there's not that much red tape. We're pretty, you can do things pretty easily here.
Yeah.
It's a sort of central place for law. It's the language. We're incredibly lucky, things we just take for granted. So I think just do it. It's really fun. And the more people do it, the more support there is. And find
don't be
friends.
scared of failing.
No. Absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anya, so much for coming to join me at the end of, I know, another incredibly busy, I mean, not one shop, 5 shops. Yeah. Only you would open 5 shops in one week. And I can't wait to come down and experience them, and I hope everyone else does as well. Anya, thank you.
Thank you very much.